Good evening and welcome to our third and final edition of our Deadline Day live coverage. We've had two brilliant shows, one this morning at 10 a.m. where a lot of news was just circulating, then at 1 p.m. where deals had already been done by then, and now we are at 5 where we're about 5 or 6 hours from the deadline, and we're joined by two guests. More fan-based this sort of podcast will be. Jonathan, it's good to have you back, mate. How have you been?
Yeah, I've been well. A lot of changes at the Albion, so we'll discuss them. A few rumours as well concerning West Brom, which I think you've already covered in the 1 p.m. broadcast. But yeah, doing really good.
Good to hear, mate. And Luke, Chelsea fan, good to have you on. I mean, last time we were discussing, you were full on Graham Potter, and a lot's changed since.
Yeah, it's been quite a wild ride. I think it's safe to say for everyone to watch. And of course, this January window has been very much the same. And very typically, the deadline day is quite a hectic one as well, as it's still ongoing.
Yeah, as you see Dan there, just working in the background, he's going to be bringing us any updates. So he might not be as active, but he will pop up if there's any transfer updates. So we'll just crack on. Guys, just a starting question to get our debate sort of flowing. Who do you think has had the best January window? Now, Jonathan, I'll come to you first.
Well, I'm actually going to go against the grain here and actually say Wolves have, because obviously Gomez from Flamengo. There's been quite a few other signings from Wolves. They've sold they put Chem Campbell on loan to Wickham, so some good experience for him. And yeah, I believe when you're in a relegation battle in the Premier League, you need all the help you can get. I mean, Forest tried it in the summer. They signed no less than 23 players. Hasn't quite worked out for Forest just yet. But yeah, I mean, good luck to Wolves staying in the Premier League. And, not to sound self-serving, but hope to see you there next season.
Yeah, of course. And obviously former Albion player Craig Dawson was made across the line. Big interest from him in the summer, and Wolves have managed to get him done. And I'd agree with you there with Wolves having the best window. I think just in terms of how important this window has been, I'd argue it's probably the most important window going into it in the club's recent history, especially since they came back up. And they had one job to do it, and to get these players in the line as soon as Lopetegui came in. He said he wanted two senior players in each position, and now if you lay Wolves on paper, it does sort of look like they've got that. I think pointing at Lamina, João Gomez, as you say, Mateus Cunha, these are top players, and these it's really good signs at Wolves now. And what a change a couple of months ago, as you can probably agree with the sort of ongoings at West Brom as well. But Luke, I'll come to you. Who do you think has had the best in this window? Because it's been quite a tricky one for some clubs.
Yeah, I think a January window is always an important window. It's quite a different one to what you get in the summer, which is usually quite big squad revamps. January, you're looking at keeping strong or getting what you need. And I think Wolves are a prime example of utilising that. They've got the new manager, they've backed the new manager, and I'd agree that they've probably got to be up there in that conversation for the best window, because like you said, they've got that depth now in every position. I think similarly, despite doing no business, I think Fulham and Brentford have to be up there purely on the fact that how well they're doing to keep hold of their entire squads. for what they want is so important. So I think they have to be in that conversation as having a great January, because they've not lost any key elements, and they're putting themselves in a great position for that summer window, where then they can go and try and get those additions to get to those levels, because they might be competing in Europe. And similarly with Brighton, especially if they keep hold of Caicedo, which obviously now Jorginho's gone to Arsenal, that looks very likely that he'll be staying there, and they again putting themselves in a brilliant position for an excellent summer transfer window.
Yeah, we may as well start with Chelsea and Jorginho. I mean, a strange deal, something we didn't really see going on, but from a Chelsea fan, how do you feel about him going?
Like I say, it was very out of nowhere. I don't think anyone this morning would have believed that was going to happen today. But I don't think you'll find many Chelsea fans who are too upset by it. He was pretty much confirmed to be leaving in the summer on a free. If Arsenal wanted him, there's a high likelihood they would have probably picked him up then anyway.
Yeah.
He clearly wants to stay in England, especially stay in London. It's a good move for him. I don't think it's a move that we can look at as, we've really sent Arsenal levels and levels above us now, we won't be able to catch them. I think it does improve Arsenal because he's a top quality player who knows the highest level, knows how to win trophies, and he adds that depth for them. But I don't think he's going in their starting 11. I don't think he takes Xhaka, Partey or Ødegaard out of that 11. So I think that's one way of looking at it. And like I say, with the financial elements that Chelsea have at the minute, he was one of the biggest earners at the club. So we've got that off the wage bill, which is a massive thing that's needed with FFP. And to get 10, potentially rising to £12 million for a player that in 6 months' time is going for free is very good business. Obviously, all just teeters on the Enzo Fernandez factor, because if he doesn't arrive, do we then panic buy another midfielder because we're now that man short with Jorginho going with so many injuries in that middle of the park area? Because he was always pretty much the only reliable. He's never injured. You've always got Jorginho. So I think it's a bit of a win-win for all parties involved, especially if we pull off the Fernandes signing, at which case I think no one can argue that it's a bad move.
Yeah, Jonathan, just on Jorginho, what do you think he brings to Arsenal? Because there's possibly an argument that he doesn't really fit into their style, but come the end of the season, he has that experience of winning trophies, and he could be that player to push them over the line.
Yeah, I mean, as you said, he's got the experience in winning trophies. He obviously won Euro 2020 with Italy. And yeah, he's a really good, really skilled midfield player. I have seen him a lot because I've got Chelsea ties with family members, so I've watched Chelsea a lot. And yeah, I mean, it's going to be a really good signing for Arsenal. It'll probably, from a Chelsea perspective, sad to see him go to a local rival, obviously. But yeah, I mean, it'll be a really good signing for Mikel Arteta. Also, I just want to say another Chelsea player who I follow as well because he's been on loan at the Albion a few seasons ago. Conor Gallagher. I mean, what's going on there? I'm hearing interest from Newcastle, Crystal Palace, even Everton, but I don't think he's keen on that. Is there any word on Conor Gallagher?
Yeah, Luke, what do you feel about him? Because he's a strange one. I mean, that incredible loan spell at Palace that a couple of seasons ago.
Yeah, he's another one that you have a strong affinity to if you're a Chelsea fan, being a Chelsea lad who's come through the academy, and you always want those players to succeed and do well, especially when you watch him. You can tell he's someone that will give 110%. He'll run himself into the ground for the club. And I think a player like that is extremely valuable to have. Obviously, lots of clubs are sniffing around him. I think the key problems are, is he a player that in this season, next season, or maybe even the season after is going to be a lock in that centre of the park for Chelsea? I'd argue probably not, unless he has quite a significant step up. A team like Crystal Palace, where we saw him excel, maybe, an Everton and Newcastle, who have obviously got Anthony Gordon in. I think they're quite similar level of player at the minute. We've seen what they can do, but they're still young and developing. So I think he could be a very strong addition, and that might be a good move for him, because he'd be able to play football, develop, force his way potentially into an England squad. Like, obviously we saw him go to Qatar, didn't feature, but it shows that Gareth sees the potential within him. But I think it has to be the right move. Like, I think Chelsea, you don't want to just let him go, especially, like I say, Jorginho's gone. If no one else is coming in, we need him, so you can't let him go in January. But that Everton bid, which I think was like 40, rising to potentially 45 million, that sort of money, if you can get that money in when you're trying to spend over 100 million on Fernandes, I think it's an important bit of investment that I think could be a sensible move. But obviously, we've seen that he's apparently rejected that move. Palace want him back; he'd be keen on it, but it's only a loan. And I think unless someone's coming in with a 40-odd million pound bid for him, we shouldn't be letting him go at any point around now.
Yeah, Dan, it was mentioned Newcastle there. Just come on, I'm a huge Newcastle fan. How would you take lightly to Gallagher? I know you've been interested in a while. James Maddison, fairly similar player.
I feel like Newcastle's business in this window is done now.
Yeah.
Anthony Gordon in.
Maybe in the summer then.
I think, to be honest, I think Gallagher was perhaps just a last resort, and it was just a bit of sniffing around if anything was desperately needed. Obviously, we're letting John Joe Shelby go to Nottingham Forest today. But then again, he hasn't played all season, so it's not that big of a miss. But I do think Newcastle will return from Maddison in the summer. As I say, his contract will be running down, so Leicester might have to sell, might have no choice, to be honest, especially if we offer some money. And of course, I think Maddison's a fantastic player, but I think Gallagher could have done a job, but I think Newcastle prefer James Maddison. I think they've scouted him for a long time, and I think he'll be someone who will want to go to a team. As I say, Leicester have been a great club in recent years, but Newcastle might be in Europe next season, and Leicester likely won't be. So I think he might want that move just to advance his England career as well.
Yeah, Jonathan, do you think sometimes a transfer for these younger English players is what's stopping them from getting into that England squad? Obviously, Luke mentioned Gallagher went to Qatar, but Maddison missed out quite a lot, definitely.
Yeah, I mean, it could be the same with like Ivan Toney. He was doing really well with Brentford, didn't get picked. So yeah, it might be a case of, maybe Gareth Southgate is keeping his options open for Euro 2024. But yeah, because some of the more experienced players, that could be their last tournament. You're talking like maybe Harry Kane. You don't know how long he's gonna continue playing international level. So yeah, I mean, I think Gareth is just keeping his options open, like with James Maddison, like with Conor Gallagher. He's already brought in young players like Bukayo Saka into the squad already. So I think he's just trying to find the balance between, the older players, how long they're going to last compared to how much experience the younger players will have come tournament year.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, let's just get straight into Chelsea's business now. I mean, Luke, what are your thoughts on it? Because they obviously experienced that transfer ban a few years ago. Obviously, we were together at university. We sort of went through that together and saw how frustrating that could be for a Chelsea fan. I mean, they've splashed the cash towards 500 million spent since the summer. That's absolutely outrageous figures. And they're breaking all sorts of records. What are your thoughts on it? Is it sort of quite scary maybe going into that?
I think we're in a really strange position at Chelsea right now. I think it's one of the biggest rebuilds that we've seen from any major club in a very long time, because it's not just a squad rebuild. We've had a whole new owner take over, a new board, everything's changed from top to bottom, new manager, new backroom staff. Like, to have that drastic a change. And I think for a few years now, people have been crying out for quite a large squad revamp. If you look through the squad, it's not a bunch of players that have been signed by a manager. You've got, because of the chop and change style that we had in managerial systems, you've got Conte signings, with Sarri signings, with Lampard signings, and Tuchel signings, and now Potter signings, all in the same squad. So they all obviously have different elements to their game. So I think for a while there's been quite a big need for quite a, rip it up from the ground and build again. And obviously we've been sort of looking at teams like Arsenal, look what they've done with Arteta. They've got a manager, they've built a project and backed him, given it time, and it's working wonders. I think that's clearly what they intend to do. I think Bodie and the rest of the board, that's what they're looking to try and do. gave Potter this long-term deal. All these signings are getting massive term deals. And I think it's a case of let him build for a few years. If in 3 seasons' time, we're not anywhere near a Champions League side with all the money that's been invested, then you might see a managerial change. But I think it'll be a similar system. I think there's so much being put into place from that top level right down to the bottom that I think it's a necessary sort of situation that we find ourselves in. And we're fortunate that things like a Jorginho going, who was on such a massive wage, will actually have a massive impact. And obviously on those long contracts I touched on, apparently the reason we've been doing that is a financial element in FFP, because we can spend 80 million on a player over a 7-year deal. It works out at what, like, you know, a handful of million per year, rather than being written down as 80 million, 900, blah, 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 and it makes it just stack up. So I think we're trying to navigate that, and obviously there's rumours that FIFA have noticed it. They're trying to crank down on it, stop teams being able to do it. So FFP wise, I'm not too concerned, and I think there is a lot of players that are in that squad that we're willing to see go. Ziyech obviously might be going to PSG this evening, so that'll be a big thing for the wage bill. In the summer, I wouldn't be surprised if players like Loftus-Cheek are sold, and I'm not saying Loftus-Cheek's going to go off for 80 million, and that's going to be like, well, I've got a direct swap, but you might get 15 million for him, and he's also a top earner at the club. Because you have to think at Chelsea, even players like Loftus-Cheek who are not featuring are still on over 100 grand a week. So financially, there's a lot of wiggle room. If Kante goes, I think he's on rumoured around, you know, potentially like 300 grand a week. So if he leaves on a free in the summer, like that's a big wedge of money that you can deal with. And I think with these young players we're signing, we're not giving them ridiculous wages. They're getting obviously big wages because they're top players at a club like Chelsea, where you're always going to earn a lot of money. But like Fernandes, for example, if he signs today, I don't see him being put on 300 grand a week or something stupid. I think he'll have a much more sensible but longer term contract. And I think the business is, from the outside, it looks quite erratic, but I think everything looks like it's actually sort of falling into place. And if you look at signings like Badiashile, who's come in at centre half, no one really knew too much about him. Everyone went, oh, it's just Chelsea splashing cash on the young centre half for the sake of it. And I know he's only played a handful of games so far, but he's just slotted in brilliantly, and you can see the plan with him. And more long-term deals like Gusto and obviously going back, that's a brilliant bit of business for future planning, protection. Reece James gets injured again, we're not in such a mess. He offers, you know, versatility as well. There's really, really sensible deals. And I think Mudryk is one of the best signings. He's made me more excited to watch Chelsea games than anyone since Eden Hazard. Like, I was fortunate enough to be at Anfield to watch him make his debut, and the way the ball sort of just glided on his foot and the excitement that him just being on the pitch, not even on the ball, gave to the fans. You can get that energy through a fan base. It's saying we're going to surge into a team, and it helps you push on. And his dribbling and style was the most Hazard-esque in terms of you just locked eyes on him and you couldn't take him off. Like, you were just drawn to watching this man play football and sort of in awe of the skills he possesses. So I think long term, we're in such a good position, hopefully, under this system. And obviously, we've still got João Felix, who looked so good before his red card and everything, but he looked brilliant. So I'm excited. And Mudieke is coming as well. Like, we've got such a thrilling attack that we're building. And I think obviously it's just the midfield right now that's the one that you can look at and really scrutinise as this needs help. And I think it's quite clear for the last 48 hours that we're doing everything we can to go after the guy who we think is going to solve that problem. So I think as a fan, you've got to be really grateful, not just to Bode, but to Roman Abramovich, going all the way back to that, because it shows the due diligence he put in to find the perfect owner. It showed that Roman cared so deeply about Chelsea Football Club that he wouldn't just sell to the top bidder, to the first guy who came in with loads of money. He's waited and gone, who can continue what I've spent years building, which is an owner who's going to invest, back this club, and work hard to make it a club that wins not only trophies within the country, but European trophies as well. And I think that's clearly what's being done. So it's hard to not be excited as a Chelsea fan right now. I understand the scrutiny from everyone else in the world of football. I know, I know people like to say, but I think Chelsea do get a bit more scrutiny than a lot of clubs a lot of the time. And I think it's going to be a stick to beat us with for quite a while. And people will use it against Potter and try and get him in a bit of a difficult situation. But we've seen it, even like Forest is a more scaled down version of it. Look what happened in their summer. We touched on it earlier. It's over 20 signings coming in. And it's taken them 6 months, but they've stuck by the manager. They gave him a new deal. And it started to click. They've climbed out that relegation zone and they're looking like a better team. And they've made a few more signings this window and they look like sensible signings. Like Shelvey is a sensible signing for a team like Forest because he knows the Premier League and he's going to come in and he's just a safe pair of hands in that middle of the park to help you control football matches, which a team like Forest desperately need. And I think scale that up and it'll be the same at Chelsea. It will click. It will just take time. It will just take time, and that's where we're at.
And I think it's interesting there how you say about the sort of there's this squad that you have at Chelsea, but you know, certain from Sarri still, Lampard's in there. You know, Conte goes far as back as that. Jonathan, just how important is it that you know you need to back managers because it's seemingly in West Brom's side now there will still be signings from you know as far back as Slaven Bilic in the side.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there hasn't been much transfer deals with the Hawthorns at the moment. Literally, this window, we've only had one transfer in, and it literally happened just as we came on the air today. Nathaniel Chalobah has come to the Albion from Fulham. I did have to change my notes there while Luke was speaking from close deal to undisclosed. So that has definitely come through. So now we've got Nathaniel Chalobah for Albion. In my opinion, it's a really good signing. He's been really instrumental for Fulham, most notably last season in their promotion push. And, you know, they went up as champions. So, yeah, I believe that's a really good deal for the Albion. But in terms of like, we've had most people like leave the club in recent windows. Not many come in. Martin Kelly, of course, yesterday was confirmed as to go into Wigan on loan. Today, we've terminated Kenneth Zohore's contract by mutual consent. So I believe, as was discussed in the earlier broadcast, he's heading back to Denmark. So yeah, I mean that's really been the basis. And, you know, it's not just the managers that have been forced to do that. It's a case of like behind the scenes, won't get into it here because this is a deadline day podcast, but the ownership and all the financial problems that I'm sure has been covered by various media outlets. You know, I've spoken to the guys who created the Action for Albion group, who are behind a few of the protests against the owner. But yeah, I mean, it's really frustrating because we've gone from Chelsea and Wolves, who are spending loads, to Albion, who literally for the past few years have relied on loans. When we got relegated the other season, I've said constantly we were a championship club plus a few loans trying to survive in the Premier League. And that is never gonna be successful. So yeah, I mean, it's all very well and good not spending any money, but yeah, as a lot of Baggies fans have said this season, where's the money gone?
Yeah, well, you've got a good man in Carlos Corberán. I mean, he's clearly a brilliant championship level coach, and he gets the best out of players. Do you think how good of a fit has he been at your club, and what's the change been like as a fan, seeing them struggling so badly at the bottom, and then now they are challenging for the playoffs?
Oh yeah, I mean, we under Corberán, he's had 11 league games as Albion boss, and won 9 of them. That pretty much says it all. And the only 2 that we lost was against Coventry, which we lost 1-0 to a penalty. And of course, the other loss was Burnley, who are absolutely flying in the Championship and looking to be heading back up to the Premier League with Sheffield United. Those two seem to be the runaway leaders in the Championship at the moment. So I think the best we could hope for really is playoffs. But in 11 games, we've gone from like 23rd up to 6th. You know, that is really impressive for any manager, let alone Carlos Corberán. So yeah, I believe, and don't forget, this is the same squad that Steve Bruce had. You know, there's been no improvements to the squad so far. Well, Nathaniel Chalobah today, that's been the only improvement. So this was the same squad that Steve Bruce had, and yeah, back in October, we should have been punching well above where we were. And yeah, I mean, Corberán is doing absolute wonders with the Albion at the moment.
Yeah, Dan, we'll just throw to you. Is there any transfer updates that you can bring us live?
Yes, so Luke, just a bit of news for you in Chelsea. Enzo Fernandez is having a medical as we speak.
Oh, wow,
we needed
thoughts on that, but just to summarise?
I think that's got to be a great sign, hasn't it? He's not going to be having the medical if something's not finally been broken through. Like I said, we've been crying out for a midfielder for a very long time. I think even through things like winning the Champions League, like we've been brilliant, but there was still a glaring, a lack of depth in that midfield. I think Jorginho going was always a sign that we were confident that this deal was going to happen. I don't think we'd let him go otherwise. It'd be interesting to see if there's potentially another out that happens now, if it does get done before the window shuts, maybe setting things up for the summer, that sort of move. But I think he's an outstanding footballer. We all saw how good he was at the World Cup. I'm not going to sit here and pretend I've watched Benfica week in and week out, but from comparing the sort of numbers he puts up in his passing, especially compared to the midfield options we've currently got, I think only Mason Mount's really on a similar level to him, and it's a player that we've been crying out for, a player that can sit in that midfield. I think he suits Potter's play so much, a confident ball-playing midfielder who is that almost, and I'm not comparing him to De Bruyne in any stretch because no one's on that man's level, but he'll be the first player in our squad who, like De Bruyne does for Man City, has that ability to get the ball and play a pass that cuts through that opposition line. And with the wingers that we've invested in, that's the sort of player we need. So I think it's an absolutely brilliant bit of business. Like I say, if we can get it done, which hopefully it's now looking like we are.
Yeah, and just I think that probably summarises our show, guys. But just to run down, so Chelsea are nearing the signing of obviously Enzo Fernandez, young player of the tournament at the World Cup, brilliant World Cup winner with Argentina as well, of course. From Liverpool, the closest they're probably going to get is they've made an approach to buy back Melwood for the LFC women's team. So I think that's about as close as Liverpool are going to be to any business in this January window. But yeah, United also pushing hard to sign Marcel Sabitzer from Bayern Munich. I think would be a very nice fit in that midfield, fairly similar to Christian Eriksen, and hopefully can fill that void when he's injured. But yeah, it's been a brilliant show, guys, and cheers for coming on and discussing this. Obviously, we could go on for hours and hours about Chelsea and how controversial and how surely in the next few years we'll probably be seeing them at the top, whereas West Brom are struggling because they've got a brilliant manager, but they're just not investing that money. But yeah, it's been really contrasting and good to hear your thoughts, guys. So yeah, thanks for coming on, and hopefully there's not as many deals in the next few hours, but you never know with the good old game, do you? Cheers, guys.
No. Cheers. Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Yep. Thank you.